The first time my phone rang at 3:33 in the morning, I almost let it go to voicemail. Then I saw the caller ID, my name, my number, my own face smiling back at me from a screen that was supposedly ringing from somewhere else entirely. I answered anyway, and the voice that said hello back to me was mine, except it knew things about the next 24 hours of my life that hadn't happened yet. Chapter 2. The Empty Chapter. My name is Nora Kessler. I'm 31. I work as a freelance transcriptionist, and for the better part of a decade, I have not slept a full night without waking somewhere between 2 and 4 in the morning, heart going, for no reason I could ever explain. I live alone in a rented house outside Tacoma. I mention the insomnia because it matters. It's the reason I was awake at all when this started. It was a Tuesday in late September. I'd been transcribing a deposition until almost 2, and I'd finally drifted off on the couch with the television murmuring when my phone lit up the room at 3:33 a.m. The screen said, Nora Kessler, and under it, my own cell number, digit for digit. A coincidence, I told myself, before I'd even finished thinking the word. I answered the way you answer things you don't understand. Cautiously, half convinced it's a glitch, half hoping someone laughs and explains the joke. Hello? A pause. Then a voice answered, and it took me 3 full seconds to understand what I was hearing, because the voice was mine. Down to the small rasp I get in my throat after a long day of talking to no one. Don't drive over the Puyallup Bridge tomorrow. 4 words, flat and certain, like a woman reading a weather report she'd already lived through. Then the line went dead. No dial tone. Call duration. 11 seconds. Like it had never happened. I told myself it was a prank, some voice cloning scam. I almost believed it, lying there until it got light out. I did not drive over that bridge the next day. I found out that evening that a tanker had jackknifed on it during the afternoon commute, right in my usual lane, at the exact time I would have been there. 2 people were critical. If I'd left at my normal hour, I'd have been the 3rd car in that pileup. I told myself it was a coincidence. I told myself that for exactly 6 more days. The second call came at 3:33 again. This time, the voice told me something from 23 years ago, when I was 8. There's a stuffed rabbit buried under the maple tree behind your mother's old house. You never told anyone you buried it there. You never told anyone its name. I hadn't thought about that rabbit in decades. I'd named him Bartholomew and buried him myself with a serving spoon, certain that if I buried him, he'd come back different. Nobody knew about that. Not my mother. Not my ex-husband. Nobody. I called my carrier the next morning. A representative checked the records and went quiet in a way I didn't like. Ma'am, I'm showing 2 incoming calls at those times. But there's no outgoing call matching them anywhere in our system. As far as the network's concerned, nobody placed that call. It just arrived. Nobody I spoke to after her had a better answer. The 3rd call didn't warn me about myself. Tell Denise not to take the stairs at the Fremont building on Thursday. 3rd floor landing. The railing gives. Denise was my neighbor, a physical therapist in her 50s. I told her, badly, that I'd had a strange dream about her falling. She thanked me the way you thank someone you're trying to get away from. On Thursday, Denise fell down that stairwell when a railing that had passed inspection 11 months earlier gave out under her hand. She survived. A shattered hip, a concussion, 6 weeks in rehab. I found out from another neighbor, standing on my own porch in the cold, feeling something in my chest that wasn't quite fear yet. It was closer to vertigo, the sensation of a floor that it always felt solid, quietly admitting it wasn't. When I visited her, she looked at me a long moment before she spoke. "You told me. Before it happened. How did you know that?" I didn't have an answer that wouldn't have frightened her more than she already was. That was the moment this stopped being about my own life and became about everyone the calls could reach through me. I drove to my mother's the following weekend. When I told her about the calls, her face went completely still. "Your father used to get calls like that," she said, "before he left." I'd grown up with almost nothing about my father, except the fact of his absence. Gone when I was 9. No note, no warning. My mother told me a different story that afternoon, one she said she'd never told anyone. She said he'd started getting calls from his own number in the months before he disappeared, and that the voice had told him things about his past. Only he could have known. And then, toward the end, things about his future he didn't want to be true. He told me the voice wasn't warning him. He said it was calling him home. He said the calls would keep coming until he answered the last one and stayed on the line until it ended. Something on the other end needed someone to stay on. 3 weeks later, he was gone. The calls, whatever they were, stopped, not just for him, for her too. In 22 years, she never received one herself, and she'd always privately wondered if that meant he'd finished something on her behalf, taken her place in it, without ever telling her why. She said she was sorry, genuinely and completely sorry, that whatever this was seemed to have found me anyway, after all the years she'd spent hoping it never would. The 4th call came 4 nights later, and it changed the shape of everything. "You have until the 14th of next month, 11:47 p.m., the Puyallup Bridge, North Railing, the exact place you didn't crash the first time. I need you to be there, not to survive it, to finish it." I tried everything a rational person tries once the rational explanations have already failed. I turned my phone off entirely. The call came through anyway. On the living room landline I'd genuinely forgotten was still plugged into the wall. I changed my cell number at real cost and real inconvenience. It came through the new one 6 days later, as though the old number had simply followed me over, glowing Nora Kessler on a screen that had never known that name before. I checked into a hotel 40 miles away under a different name, paid cash, told no one where I was. At 3:33, the room's landline rang, though the front desk swore the next morning that no outside call had come through their switchboard at all. There was no outrunning it. There had never been a version of this where distance was going to matter. By the 3rd week of October, with the 14th bearing down on me like a date I'd somehow already lived once before, I understood I was going to have to answer the last call and find out what finishing it meant. On the night of the 13th, I sat with every light in the house on and waited. The phone rang at 3:33 exactly. I let it ring twice, then answered, and for the first time, I spoke first. "I know it's you. I need you to tell me what's happening." A long pause. Then the voice came back, and something underneath it had changed. "I'm not calling you from before this happened. I'm calling you from after. I've been in that car on that bridge for a long time, Nora. Longer than you'll understand until you've lived it too. The accident doesn't kill you. It just stops you. Right there. Forever. Or close enough." I asked why. Why any of this, if the ending was already fixed? Because being on the phone is the only time I'm not alone in it. Every warning isn't to save you. I already know it doesn't save you. It's to keep you talking long enough that when it's your turn in that car, you'll understand what to do differently. Stay on the line. Call the next one. Someone has to be on the other end when it happens. or the person in that car never stops being alone in it. That's the only mercy there is. I understood, sitting there with the phone shaking against my ear, that my father hadn't disappeared 22 years ago at all. He'd answered. I drove to the Puyallup Bridge on the 14th, because by then, I no longer believed there was a version of this where I didn't. I parked near the north railing at 11:40. At 11:47 exactly, the phone rang. My name, my number, my photo. And I answered before the first ring finished, because I finally understood what I was supposed to do. I stayed on the line. I don't remember the impact. I remember headlights cutting sideways across my windshield in the half-second, before everything folded inward. And I remember my own voice still in my ear, steady, telling me it wasn't my fault, telling me I wasn't alone, telling me that someone would be listening on the other end when it was time to make the call myself. I woke in a hospital bed 9 days later with a fractured pelvis, 2 broken ribs, and no memory of the drive home I apparently made afterward, though the police report insists I did, that I called it in myself, coherent and calm, giving my exact location, my exact injuries, my exact name. Nobody has explained why the timestamp on that 911 call reads 3:33 a.m., 4 hours and 46 minutes after the crash, and, according to the hospital's own records, almost 2 hours after I was already unconscious on an operating table with no phone anywhere near my hand. I went looking for my father after that, the way you look for someone once you finally understand what happened to them. I found nothing. No death certificate, no forwarding address, no trace of a man who simply stopped needing to be found the day someone else picked up the line for him. I think now that this is what waiting looks like for whoever is left in that car. Not silence, just the hope that the next voice on the phone will be steady enough to carry you the rest of the way. I don't sleep through the night anymore. I never really did. But now, when I wake at 3:33, I don't reach for the phone to see who's calling. I reach for it to see whether, this time, the name on the screen is finally someone else's.